I'm live. What's up, guys? How's it going? Welcome to another episode. Oh, wait, are we live now? What is happening? What's happening? I see 0 seconds. All right, we are live. Fucking YouTube. What's up, guys? Welcome to another edition of Full Blast. We got kind of a hodgepodge aesthetic happening, so I'm getting my hair cut at the end of the month. Very excited. But it just, well, actually, you know what? This does not look as bad as I thought it was going to. All right, I think we maybe just ditched the hat. We ditched the IJ hat. Also, I got my blue light glasses on because I've been staring at screens a lot these past few days for a number of reasons. And my eyes are just having fucking none of it. So that's the ensemble. So today I want to talk about, this is a concept in gaming, game theory, storytelling, all of these different art forms and means of expression are basically getting at the same thing. I like the concept of early game, mid game, end game / late game. But again, this is applicable in true NI fashion to fucking everything. Because, and this sort of as a segue into this, one of the biggest reasons that there is so much video game analogy in the culture of OP and in the, in the way that these things are explained, it's not because Dave is a huge nerd. He is a huge nerd, but that's not why. The reason why it's so easy to bake in these video game references is that games are at their core storytelling. And again, beyond that, games are a relationship. Storytelling is relationship. Art is relationship. Everything comes down to human behavior, human responses, emotions, feelings, values, human need. That's all anybody is doing when somebody makes a video game, writes a song, writes a piece of sketch comedy, does a stand-up special. I watched a couple of them recently. I just watched the new Patton Oswalt one, which was fucking great. The new Hannah Gatsby, my goodness. Right, the new Hannah Gatsby one, also fantastic, not nearly as intense as Nanette. So like, if Nanette was a lot for you, you're gonna be fine with Douglas. It's totally fine. It's delightful. It's just great. And I also, there's the older Tiffany Haddish one from like 3 years ago that happened to pop up, and I watched that one too. And in all of these stand-up specials, in all of these games, in all of these sketches, I'm gonna be talking about some sketch comedy, like I love to do in these videos because it's so fucking relevant to so many things. It's like a microcosm of human behavior. It's beautiful. In all these things, you can really see like whether or not there is a clear arc or not, and whether or not there is a clear beginning, middle, and end. The reason that, chess is so enduringly popular is that it really is, every game feels like you're telling a story. And that when you have two people of relatively equal skill, there's a lot of back and forth. And there isn't this feeling of like each stage of the game is fairly well defined, but not super rigid. So like there's still that fun and flexibility. It's a beautiful, beautiful game, right? Full disclosure, I am so bad at chess, it would blow your mind. Like you would think that just as an INTJ and just like general thinkery person, I would be at least passably good at chess. I am not passably good at chess. Like I'm just not. Do not say that I am passively good at chess. because I am not. But in chess, in these games, in all of these things, this idea of early game, mid game, late game / end game is really, really apparent. And I think that that's something that is really worth digging into, worth trying to understand as well as you can. Because you really can apply it to various stages of any part of your life that is based on a relationship, whether it is relationship with a partner, relationship with a child, relationship with your culture at large, relationship with a piece of music, relationship with the art that you make that is intended for a recipient. And all of those things are about the relationship, period. So, breaking it down. In the early game, both players are, and again, I'm going to use game terminology. I'm not a sociopath. We're going to get to the relationship-y stuff in a second. I'm just laying out the framework. In the early game, both players start off with minimal resources. So again, this is in any sort of competitive game, right? Or at the beginning of a game, you start off with not a lot of resources, right? Whether that takes the form of you're a kid and you don't have much, you just have an allowance, you don't have a car. Well, then as you get older, you get some more responsibility, you get a job, you start being able to pay for things, you get a little more independence, and so on and so forth, right? You gain skills, you gain experience, you maybe do an internship, maybe get a summer job, maybe do this, maybe do that, doesn't matter, right? It's that very typical slowly building your skills thing, right? And I love that, man. I think that's a beautiful thing. I've said the word beautiful a lot today. I've just been in like a really vibey, beautiful heart space lately. And the fact that I said the word heart space with total sincerity, I think that means I'm officially an Angelino now. I think that that's just it. Like, that was it. I got my Runyon and my green juice, and now I'm saying words like heart space and totally meaning it. Great. But it's a beautiful thing because there's a fumbling aspect to it. It's in the words of my, I guess he's like my sage now, Aaron Alexander. I'm just going to keep referring him to fucking everything. But he talks about like how a child learns to stand, and he's like, he crawls and he gets up a little, and then he falls in his arms and he doesn't have the coordination. And then eventually he stands up, and it's a beautiful thing, right? That's the early game. It's supposed to be fumbly. You're not actually supposed to know what you're doing, and you are supposed to figure it out organically. Animal Crossing does an extraordinarily good job of this. Animal Crossing, it's an incredible game, wonderfully designed. It came at a time in our culture that we all just fucking needed it. It's incredible. And what that game does so well, assuming you're not time skipping, is it really draws out the early game into like several weeks just because of the speed at which shit grows. Like, literally grows in the game. You can't progress faster than the days let you. And it's so nice, and it's so gentle. And it's why it was such an important part of my quarantine experience, because I needed an environment. I framed it in a couple of different ways, and I thought at first that it was like, I just need someone to be nice to me. I just need somebody to take care of me and not pressure me and just like let me fail and explore and whatever. That is not untrue. Those are absolutely things that I need. But what I actually needed was I needed an environment where the early game was respected as such, where you're dropped into this thing and it is understood that it just takes time. We expect it to go slowly, and that is fine. And weirdly, I think back to my recruiting job. In a lot of ways, they tried to instill that in me. They're like, look, you're just in the ramp up stage. You're in week 2. Don't worry about it. You're fine. This stuff takes a while for it to catch. Like, don't burn yourself out. You're fine. Right? There were a lot of systematic problems with that entire job as far as a fit for me and the way the management was run and the split office and the city and the boop and the bop. But that component of it, they actually, to their credit, really did try to do a good job of instilling into everybody that, like, this is not a sprint. The first number of months you're here, like, really ease into it. It's okay. But I love that Animal Crossing did that. And I think that I play a lot of Elder Scrolls. That's like my main MMO that I'm into. That also is pretty gentle in a lot of ways. Like, yes, you can see the other people fucking hustling their asses off who've been doing this for years with the same character and fucking whatever. But, like, if you're just out there with your shitty sword and, like, no armor, you're not going to get your ass kicked because of the armor that you have. You might get your ass kicked if you're not a good player or if it's a new class or a new fucking whatever, but you're not going to get your ass kicked simply by virtue of having the audacity to start something. So I bring all of that up because I think it is so tempting to give into the cultural narrative that says that we should bypass the early stages of the game, whatever game that is, that our job is to make this part go faster, to quote Rent. So in the musical Rent, there's Roger and Mimi, based on Mimi and Rodolfo from La Boheme, because it's based on La Boheme. And they both have AIDS, and it's the early 90s, and each one doesn't know the other one has AIDS. And at the end of Act 1, they sing this little duet together. It's really, really pretty. It's like it's in the middle of La Vie Boheme. There's like this big party La Vie Boheme, and then this beautiful, intimate little moment, and then it ends Act 1. Just great. But in this part, you see the two of them, like, they clearly care about each other, but they were holding themselves off from love because both of them have AIDS. And in 1992, there was no PrEP. There was an even bigger stigma than there is now. Like, it was really, really bad in the late 80s and early 90s, especially in New York City, and in places like San Francisco as well. A little bit of AIDS history. Go watch The Normal Heart. If you're actually interested in more, go fucking watch The Normal Heart. Oh my God, it's beautiful. So there's a moment in there during their conversation where they're talking and it's weird, and she's like, AZT break. And AZT was a medicine for AIDS, and they both go outside, and they're like, oh shit, you oh my God, we both have AIDS. Oh my God, the one thing that was keeping us from loving each other is not a barrier anymore because we're in this together. And Mimi says something really, really poignant. And she's like, let's just make this part go faster. And I think it's really indicative of her fragility and of her mindset, and how in her mind one of the big taglines of Rent is no day but today, right? That anything could end in a moment because everybody is surrounded by their friends literally just dying just out of nowhere. And so her whole thing is like, yeah, we get it. We love each other. Can we please just get to the middle of our relationship so that we can actually enjoy it and not have to go through this awkward beginning to middle transition step, right? And I think that it's indicative of, her fear and her fragility and the fact that she rightly doesn't trust that the world will be around much longer for her. And so she's like, I have to take advantage. I have to, no day but today, I have to seize this moment. And I think that that's such a dangerous way to live. Because when you bypass the early stages of the game, when you bypass that initial clumsy, fumbling growth part, you rob yourself of so many mistakes that you can actually learn from. And one of the biggest things that I don't think that I have been, obviously, been extraordinarily fortunate in so many ways. But like moving to LA, I was very, very strategic about a lot of it. And I really, really thought it through. And I don't think that I have or had any major fuck ups since moving here. Any major like, wow, you really dug yourself into an awful, awful hole. I don't think. I could be wrong. We'll see down the future what the future holds, whatever. But like in these first 10 months, so far, that just hasn't happened. But one mistake I did make that mercifully the goddess of Los Angeles was like, no, that's not going to happen for you, was that I tried to seamlessly transition between my life in New York into my new life in LA. I was like, I can just take everything and start in the middle with respect to Los Angeles. And then the goddess of Los Angeles was like, nice try. That is not how this works. That's not how anything works. But boy, oh boy, that is not how LA works. You have a year of like ramping up. So just expect to not do anything. This is true for anybody moving to LA. And like that first year is just a wash for everybody. Does not matter where you come from, whether you come from a small town, big city, other country, suburb of LA. Like if you're, doing the, I don't know, let's say you live in Anaheim or you live in San Diego or Santa Clarita, right? You grew up in Santa Clarita and now you're like, I'm going to move to LA and do the LA thing. Even for you, it's going to take a fucking year to actually transition. So just know that. But I bring that up because I was so eager. It wasn't that I was eager to start doing work. I think if I had been eager to start doing work, that would have been okay. I was eager to get past the awkward, shitty beginning stages. And to get into the mid game, that's where all the interplay is. That's when you really have agency. That's when, I can actually leverage these skills that I have and really make something out of them and like really make some moves. I wasn't trying to get to the end game. Like, I'm not saying I want to land and then book a job and then get nominated for an Academy Award in less than a year. Like, that was not the goal. But I did want to get past the like, I'm new to LA. chunk of life a lot more quickly than was helpful or beneficial or healthy or anything. And then the goddess of LA was like, this is how it works. You're just going to do the thing. Right? I was like, fine. And I'm so glad I did. Because in that year, and especially with coronavirus, oh my God, the fact that coronavirus happened during my first year in LA was like the biggest boon that I never, ever would have asked for. Ever. But it ended up being this extraordinary blessing because all of the stuff that I was holding on to about the world moving too fast and obligation, like emotional ties to people and institutions and friends and family and feelings and patterns of behavior that I was so attached to as a result of feeling like I had to keep up and get past this early stage that I am supposed to be in. The coronavirus made that mid game like not a thing. It's like, great, yeah, no. There's no mid game right now. We're all at the beginning. We're all kind of starting from square one. And in that, I was able to go, oh, okay, well, I know how to do this. Because the fact of the matter is, my 34 plus years of being on this planet, plus my decades worth of experience being an SAT and ACT tutor and working with high schoolers and middle schoolers across the spectrum of experience, preparation, readiness, whatever. Oh, I know how to do this. I just didn't give myself the right amount of time. Like I was trying to do, it wasn't even that I was trying to do mid-game work in the early game. It was that I just disrespected the early game entirely. Because in the early game of any game, whether it is Magic the Gathering or Go or chess or Settlers of Catan or whatever, poker, like not a hand of poker, but like a game night of poker, right? If you're trying to win the whole poker night, everyone starts off with the same amount of resources. And your goal in the early hands of the game is to amass more resources in the early stages of the game that you can then leverage in the mid game, right? And there are obviously a number of play styles, right? You can either go glass cannon, very high risk, high reward in the early game and then bust out. Or you can say, no, you know what? I'm going to really try to slowly chip away, make a couple of smart bets, and then make my stand in the mid game, right? Again, there's a flow to it. There is an arc to it. And I'm going to bring up, and I know I talk about this all the time, but it's so flawless in basically every way that I can't not bring it up every time. I want to make a metaphor for anything. And that is the Key and Peele substitute teacher sketch. It's just maron. For those of you who have not seen it, go watch, pause this video, go watch Key and Peele's substitute teacher, the first one, and then come back. Give you a second. Great, you're back. Welcome. Okay, so the teacher sketch. Funny as fuck, right? So the reason that sketch works is because they take their time at the beginning of the sketch to actually develop the relationship. And in the case of sketch comedy, the resource you're dealing with is the relationship. The more clearly you can establish the relationship between either the person and the world around them, the two people in the sketch, the one sort of moderator, and in this case, this would be like the teacher is the moderator, and then you have this group that is just sort of like playing off of him, right? It's all about the relationship and clarifying that relationship. And you want to do it quickly, right? You want to do it efficiently, but that doesn't happen in the first second. He doesn't walk in and say, all right, what's up, class? I'm a substitute teacher. Jaqueline. Wait, what? Why? We're already in the mid game now, right? We went from, what's up, guys? I'm your substitute teacher. Let's take roll, Jaqueline. We have no context for where Jaqueline comes from. Instead, they take their time. Good afternoon, class. I'm Mr. Garvey. I'm from the inner city. I don't take no guff. Pan to a room full of white kids. Let's take roll. Or maybe I think he says let's take roll, and then, I don't remember the exact order, but like it's basically, we take a while to actually set up the relationship. Actually, I think the way that it goes, it stays on him. He goes, all right, let's take roll, Jaqueline, pan to the room full of white kids. No Jaqueline here. Raise your hand. Do you mean Jacqueline? And it's the funniest fucking thing in the world. But it's only funny if we establish in the early game what the relationship is. Without that, we have no... Jaqueline to Jacqueline isn't funny. Mispronouncing a word isn't funny. It's like putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable. It's cute for a second, but we've seen people mispronounce words before. That is not a new concept. And we really don't want to see people just mispronouncing words for 4 minutes. That's not fun either. What's fun is expressing this relationship through mispronouncing very common white people's names as a commentary on, right? And again, that's where they get into their commentary bit. It's, with the racial differences. Love Key and Peele, right? So if you're in the early game, be willing to spend the time it takes to actually develop the relationships. And if you are like me, if you found yourself in a new position, I'm just going to use the recruiting that I did for 2 weeks. I was in a new position, and it was really, really clear that relationship was just, I wasn't in a place to develop the relationship. The environment that we were all in was not conducive to relationship building, period. I just get out, right? But if you feel that, if you're like, you know what? No, this is a thing that matters to me. This is a thing that's important to me. And there aren't any major systemic barriers to me developing this relationship except for time. Worth it. And I focus on the relationship because industries will come and go. The hot new video game will come and go. Trying to build a relationship with an institution or a thing is not going to fucking work out for you in 2020. What you want to do, and what I'm trying to do, so I'm doing these improv classes, right? I don't give a shit about doing improv. I marginally give a shit about doing sketch comedy. But even that is most likely going to be a stepping stone. Like, I'm not trying to be on SNL. that's going to be a stepping stone to doing stuff on sitcoms or doing movies or doing something else, right? But what I can invest in and what's important to me to invest in are the relationships with my classmates, because that shit can and will actually sustain you through whatever ups and downs there are. And being able to go, you are fucking rad as hell. I dig you. Let's do this, right? Regardless of what we're doing, right? To quote the great David J. Matthews, turns out not where, but who you're with that really matters, right? And it's the same idea. So when you're in the early stages, and I know that I've talked a lot about the early game and not as much about the mid game or the late game. We're going to touch on that, but I think that we all sort of just know what that looks like or is supposed to look like. We don't have as much of a frame of reference about like, what does the early game look like in 2020? When you get into a new relationship with somebody, what does that look like? What is that relationship developing? What form does that take? And checking in with each other and making sure that you're like, yeah, okay, ooh, we stumbled here. Okay, we're doing this thing. Right. I do not like it when you do this. Please don't do that. Okay, great. I'll see if I can not do that. Oh, you know what? I don't need to do that. We're good. And right. And now it's like growing in an organic way and in a really sturdy way, so that when you do transition from, right, so to go back to the sketch, the mid game happens, it starts as soon as she says Jacqueline, we're like, oh, I understand what game we're playing now. And then the whole mid game is just Jaqueline, Balake, D Nice, Aaron, Oshag Hen, like just running through all of these names. But I want to talk about the end game as well. From what I have gathered, the majority of the people in the objective personality community tend to be, I'm going to say, Dave's age-ish or younger. It does not seem like there are many people over the age of 50 in the OP community. There are some, but not like a ton. So a lot of us are just starting to hit whatever our, coming out of our early game, getting into our mid game, figuring out like, yes, this is the game I want to play. This is what I want to do. These are my priorities. I got it. We're the dominoes are starting to fall into place, right? But crucially in that sketch, by the time we get right, it keeps building and building and building and building and building. By the time we get to Aaron, go to Oshag Hennessy's office, we're out of gas, right? We have hit the game. Jaqueline, D Nice, Balake, Aaron, right? And by the time we get to Oshag, it's like, okay, we get it. We are laughed out. We have explored this to its fullest. We have to conclude this somehow. We have to end this game so that we can go and do other things, right? And that can happen on a micro level, on a macro level, on a whatever level, right? That's where it gets sort of nebulous. And that's where like, I'm not going to talk about the end game like I've been there in this lifetime because I just haven't. But conceptually, things end. That's what, right? It's what our buddy Kermit the Frog says in A Muppet Christmas Carol. Life is made of meetings and partings. That is the way of it. And I think it's really important to understand that once something ceases to nourish you and ceases to fulfill you, and I'm gonna put kids in their own separate category because like the having kids thing, like that is its own beast of a thing because like you're like actually responsible for making sure they grow up. Like you can't just abandon your kids because you feel like it. Like, that's not a thing you get to do. But like, when it comes to like a partnership, a job, a hobby, a relationship with technology, music, I'm just looking around my apartment, relationship with exercise, relationship with food, diet, like those sorts of things, it's really important to be able to go, look, I am so grateful for all the time that we spent together, and the ways that I was able to learn about myself and connect with you. It's beautiful. But now I got to let it go. I got to move on to different things. And I bring that up because this morning, for the first time since March 17th, 19th, when did Animal Crossing come out? No. I think it came out. Yeah. So it came out on March 19th, I believe. And every day since March 19th, I played Animal Crossing every day. Every day. It was just part of my routine. It absolutely got me through the early stages of the quarantine depression, of the economy collapse, of like just everything crumbling around me. That was my rock, period. And today, for the first time, I just didn't boot up Animal Crossing. Maybe I will boot it up later in the day. Maybe I will not. I don't know. We have not gotten to later in the day yet. So, I bring that up because I did my walk, and I walked like 7.5 miles, and I came home, and usually I come home, I make my coffee, I load up Animal Crossing, I do my chores, and then I watch TV or play video games or do work or do whatever I do. And today I was just like, I don't think Animal Crossing is going to do it for me today. And it was fine, because it doesn't invalidate everything that came before. It just means that now, like, my town's up and running. My residents are fine. Isabel and Tom can take care of them. They're doing great. It's all good. And I think that it's important to recognize, like, when you're in the mid game and you can feel it starting to transition into the late game, and you're like, oh my God, I think we actually do need to wrap this up. My biggest piece of advice to you is just don't fight it. Whatever you're feeling, especially because it's really exciting to go from the early game to the mid game. Nobody is ever going to be like, I don't know, this mid game part where things are really cooking and everything is awesome and I'm using all of my skills, I don't know that I want to do that yet and have the success that I've been working towards all this time. Right? Like, no. You might have a little bit of apprehension, but generally speaking, if you're working towards something in the early game and you have the opportunity to transition to the mid game, you're gonna fucking take it to a fault. You are going to want to accelerate that early stage of things just to get it out of the way so that you can revel in the mid game. But when you feel like you're in the mid game, you're doing the thing, you're vibing it, you're going to feel it start to taper off. And you got to just recognize that. You got to go, oh, right. I do feel like this is kind of running its course. Oh my God. Yes. And then making the conscious decision to go, okay, I'm still in this right now. I'm still going to be present. I'm still going to give it the love and the attention and the care that it deserves when I'm in the room with it, whether it is job, person you are dating, again, not kids, but like person you're dating, city you're living in, hobby, activity, YouTube channel, podcast, fucking whatever it is. Once you feel it start to taper off, let it taper off. I I recently finished The Sopranos, and I'll end with this. The show is, I mean, it's fantastic and brilliant, but I loved the ending. I thought the ending was so powerful because it ends very abruptly. And it is a reflection. This is not a spoiler at this point. I'm not going to go into too many details about it for those of you who have not watched it and want to, but it ends really abruptly. And in talking to a lot of friends about it and people who like really think about this sort of thing, we all sort of concluded that it had to end that way because it isn't Breaking Bad, right? So Breaking Bad has a very clear, this is the beginning of Walter White's arc when he's Mr. Chips. And then he grows and then he arcs, he turns into Scarface, and then he has his Greek tragedy demise. And like, we need it to be really like satisfying closure. We see the end is near. We're prepared. We work through our stages of grief and then we let it go, right? And then we release and we accept. But like, The Sopranos doesn't work like that. And the tension just keeps amping up and then ends abruptly. And you're like, oh my God, yeah, that is how that would feel if you were in that position and in that life and in that culture. They even have a whole conversation about like, you don't see it coming, it just ends. And it's why people were so fucking shaken by it, is because we wanted that closure and we didn't get it in the way that we thought we were going to. And it's only in the aftermath, in those seconds, because it's like blackout, 3-4 seconds of black that feel like an hour, roll credits. That's when you're like, oh, right. Fortunately, for those of you who are watching this who are not in the mafia, generally speaking, you have a little more control over how you go out, broadly speaking, right? So when you feel something starting to taper off, just let it. It does not have to be a big ado. It can just be, oh my God, right, I have to just start letting go of this. And that's okay. And I need to just let go of this city that I lived in for 10 years because the city isn't nourishing me anymore. I need to let go of this relationship because what started out really wonderful has turned toxic, and I'm now at a point that I can't fix it. I just have to let it go. Okay, so like holding on to something that's clearly trying to slip through your hands is never going to work, right? It's like Jell-O, right? Well, I haven't used the Jell-O analogy yet. Oh, this is exciting, right? So you got a handful of Jell-O. First off, Jell-O is not made to be held in your hand, but you have this precious little thing of Jell-O. Maybe ice cream. How about ice cream, right? So you have this ice cream in your hand. You're eating your ice cream. You're eating your ice cream. And then it's a hot summer day and the ice cream starts to melt. And you're like, oh no. Oh fuck. How do I keep it from melting? I know. Let me try to hold on tighter. And that just makes it melt faster. And now you, oh my God. Where the fuck? Why? Right? When all you have to do is be like, okay, this thing is melting. I accept that it is melting. And so now I got to find some new ice cream to eat. So I still have this one, like we're still good, but I'm going to be looking around and I'm going to be going, all right, maybe that ice cream stand. Maybe that ice cream stand. Rather than, hang on, what if I try to make this ice cream last longer? What can I do, right? That's sort of like the bargaining stage, right? The more quickly you can get to, I see this happening. Okay, let me just work through it. And let me get to a place. I'm not saying that like melting, throw it on the ground. No, that's not what? That's unnecessary and kind of violent. But you can just be like, all right, this thing is melting. I don't know how much more we got left in this. So, like, I need to start looking for other things. And sort of letting that end game transition happen naturally and organically so that you can let go of one thing and pick up the other thing in a pretty seamless fashion. That to me is a very wise way to approach it, a very emotionally intelligent way to approach it, rather than fighting these transitions from the early game to the mid game to the late game. Rather than fighting those transitions, just let them happen. My parents, they've never been happier. I've never in my entire existence seen them as happy and in love with each other as they are right now, because they have allowed themselves to start transitioning into the late game, right? Because they're not spring chickens, right? They're in their 60s and 70s now. And so my dad has started to, come home from work a little earlier. And, they're starting to like find activities to do together and like be like that cute old couple, right? Rather than, all right, you're 40, I'm 50, let's fucking do this. Like, let's make some shit happen, man. They're past that. They don't have to do that anymore, right? They're able to sort of transition into their more twilight years, and because they have done so gracefully and have done so with a sense of release and acceptance, and not trying to hold on to their 40s and 50s, they've really done great for themselves in so many ways. And so I just encourage everybody out there, embrace the early game. Embrace the early game. Take your time. Give yourself that time. Even if the outside world won't give it to you, fuck them. If the outside world isn't giving you space to grow and be in that early game, then that's not an outside world whose validation you want or need. Just don't need it. Of course, the mid game is wonderful and exciting and ups and downs, and that's where the life happens. But then when that starts to diminish, let it. It's all good. There is value in those in the late game. Now you got wisdom. Now you can make YouTube videos about the 10 years you spent in New York that felt like 3 decades. And you can be like, this is what I learned. These are my reflections and understandings of life and the human condition that I wouldn't be able to tell you if I didn't go through the early game and all that mid game. I wouldn't have this late game that I can now talk about. So that's all I got for today. I really, really encourage you to, I know that was a lot of analogy talk today, but all of the examples I used, with the exception of the ice cream one, because that's like not a real applicable thing. But like all the other things, like I really do mean them in the most tangible way. Like they are not just metaphors. This idea of relationship and letting the relationship thrive in every stage that it is in, and not trying to force it into a stage that it shouldn't be in. I think that that's just going to make for a more satisfying life. It just is, because now you're being present, you're doing the be here now thing, and you're allowing life and reality to be what it is, instead of trying to force it into something because you think it should be that. All right, that's all I got for today. Thank you for hanging out. I really, honest to God, thought I had ice cream in my hand, and I thought I just smashed ice cream all over my palms. Now my hands are sticky, and I don't like it. Bye. Oh, God. Now there's ice cream on my computer. I don't like it.